It should be in the browser. Howdy, welcome. Do we have one more chair? Cool. Cool. Thank you, Josh, for letting me rope you into this. Normally I do that while someone presents, but all right, I think I have the right slide deck pulled up. Yep. Quick note, we are sponsored by Intelitech, which is the company and building that you're all in. Myself and Josh both work here. We're also sponsored by the Python Software Foundation, which is kind of cool. They pay for our Meetup Pro license, which is nice of them. So we are Spokane tech groups. We got the .NET users group and the DevOps users group and our users group. Again, sponsored by Intelitech. I don't believe the slide is slightly out of date. I don't think we're hiring a creative marketing generalist anymore. But we're always looking for skilled engineers, particularly senior people right now. I don't think there's a specific role we're trying to fill, but if the right senior person comes along, you know, we're always interested, or non-senior. We also do mock interviews sometimes if you're trying to get in the industry and just get experience in like, what does an interview look like at a tech company, so.
Are they still supposed to be playing noise? So I can't hear anything coming out anymore.
Oh, yes. Live. You know how OBS works?
Nope.
It's okay. Do your best. If not, it's all right. The in-person people are where my passion's at, so sorry, online people, you are. Oh, can you?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's good. Sorry, I gave you no tutorial on how any of it works.
But it looked like there's some mic feed coming through, so
okay. We'll hope for the best.
I just can't hear it. That went temporarily deaf.
That's all right. Thanks, Josh. .NET user group, kind of on hiatus because the main guy who organizes it is on a road trip in Africa with his son, driving from the south end to the north end. So that kind of put a pause on the meetups there. Python user group, so we do coffee and code the first Monday morning of every month. We made our way out to Coeur d'Alene for October. I'd like to try and make Coeur d'Alene a reoccurring thing. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, but we'll figure that out for you Coeur d'Alene people, so you don't have to drive all the way out to Spokane every meetup. Third Tuesday of the month, so tonight is our evening meetups where it's more of a presentation. Again, hopefully next month is sort of a Python API with like a front-end framework, some JavaScript stuff. And then December meetup, I forget his name. He reached out to me, works for a company in Liberty Lake called Vega Cloud, I think. He was interested in maybe hosting the meetup there. So it's not finalized yet, and I may be jumping the gun and talking about it, but hopefully for December we'll be actually in Liberty Lake, which will be fun. And they are hiring for a Python developer, I believe. I don't know what exact skills along with Python, but I can link in Discord. And then DevOps users group, October meetup TBA. Follow Intelitech, follow everything. Enough of me talking about things that aren't code. I am Joe. Thank you. And I just closed the wrong tab. All right. Cool. Show of hands. Who has heard of dependency injection? 2. All right. Who's heard of inversion of control? 2. Makes sense. They go hand in hand.
I've heard of you.
I like it. Anyone care to throw out their thoughts on what it means?
So. Yeah.
Pop quiz. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so dependency injection is a pattern that we use in programming to sort of take our dependencies and inject them through a constructor without really having to supply that using actual new keywords or anything like that. So IoC, kind of the same concept, inversion of control, which is taking dependencies that are kind of embedded inside of classes, but kind of inverting that so that they can be supplied through dependency injection, as I understand it.
No, that's totally wrong. Perfect. What I didn't tell you was if you answered it well, I was just going to give you the laptop and you can take over the presentation. So it's up to you now. Yeah, no, on the money, Josh. All right, everybody, you can go home now. No, but I hope to expand on that a little bit. But yeah, that was great. Thank you. So outlined, yeah, we'll talk about inversion of control, what dependency injection, I still haven't defined them, and then we'll look at a little package called Django DI. So what is inversion of control? Exactly like Josh said, it's an idea. So it's a little bit more abstract than dependency injection, which is sort of a method or a way of implementing a pattern. But yeah, inversion of control is the idea that the library calls your code instead of you calling a library or a framework. We've probably all written code used this pattern or idea, but maybe didn't even necessarily know it or know that this word was the pattern that we're using. Another way people refer to it is don't call us, we'll call you. So yeah, here's just a trite little example. Well, not even an example, but your code calling the library with IoC, your code is called by the library. Thus, it has inverted the control. So I will pop open a VS Code here. Hopefully that's big enough. And we'll look at an example. So here's sort of a very like hello world Python example. But what we'll see here is that this is code that is calling a library. So in this case, we're calling Python's input line by line. And we're sort of like declaring what we want this program to do. Again, line by line. We're not, oh, can you close that? Just crank it to the right, and then there's a little bar that you can, perfect, thank you. Almost like scripting, where we're just, again, like line by line, where the library isn't really doing anything for us. Like we're just calling it directly. So a difference, or something using IoC, inversion of control. Here we're using Python's tkinter framework, which is like a simple GUI. And what we're doing here is we're actually passing stuff to the framework, and then the framework calls our code for us. So just to give you a quick idea of what's going on, we're creating sort of a root object, which is going to be like our window when we run it. We create a label. We create an input or an entry, another label, another entry. But the interesting part is sort of this chunk of code, which you've probably seen something like this before. It's essentially just a callback, which if you've used like JavaScript, you probably do a lot of callback stuff. So what we're saying here is on this focus out event, call this chunk of code for me. Now, it doesn't really matter what the code's doing. In this case, I didn't even actually implement it. It's just like, I'm just showing you what an inversion of control would look like. But nowhere are we directly calling this process name function. We pass it as a reference to something in the framework, and then it calls it for us when this focus out event happens. So that would be sort of the difference between inversion of control and not inversion of control. I can run this. It's really not super interesting. IoC, Python, IoC. I've been on a Windows laptop all day, and then I popped open my Mac because I only have 2 computers. And this is, oh, here it is. Oh, deprecated. Cool. Using the wrong version of Python. All right, let's see if I have another version of Python. Yeah, I don't. I do Python 3. I don't even know what I have on this computer. No. Okay, well, that's fine. It wasn't very interesting code anyways, but my other code should run. I don't use tkinter. I really typically wouldn't recommend it for any sort of UI development, unless it's something like very kind of basic or like just serving your own purposes, but for like writing code that other people are paying you for or are going to use, it's probably not the move. Apologies if I just roasted anyone who does use it, but it's fine, it's fine. Okay. So some examples of inversion of control. tkinter, like we just saw, unit test, the built-in Python module. If you're writing unit tests using that module or package, there's some functions that you can call, or that you write, set up, and tear down, and you never actually call those in your code. The unit test framework calls those for you to execute some setup functionality before your tests run, and then some tear down functionality when your tests are over. And then another example could be like your Django views / URLs. If you're familiar with Django, like you don't actually call your view anywhere, or the function that's executed when someone goes to like a URL for your Django web server, the framework calls it for you. So that's all IoC really is. On to the little bit more interesting part of it. What is dependency injection? So dependency injection is a technique, an IoC technique for separating construction from use. So this is kind of what Josh alluded to. Instead of newing up a new instance in the middle of your method that's using some auxiliary service, or in Python we don't really write new, but that's okay. He writes C#. We'll forgive you. I'm just kidding. So we pass a class its dependencies instead of creating them within the class. For me, this was something that was a little bit confusing for a long time, not because it's a complex idea, but it's just like this really big word, dependency injection. You're like, wow, that's probably really advanced. But it's really as simple as instead of a service creating its dependencies, you give it its dependencies. That's all it really is. So it's actually pretty simple. It can get more complicated, and we'll look into what that looks like in a little bit. We'll look at like an auto dependency injection framework, where you have something that's automatically passing the dependencies to the service, but nowhere are you actually in your like application code doing that. So let's pop over to some more examples. Any questions before, did IoC make sense? It's a little bit more abstract, I would say, than dependency injection, whereas it's kind of just a specific way of writing code. Okay, cool. So here we've got a super fun example. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit of some code that has a finder object, whatever that is. And we create a list of movies. And then, so if you call movies directed by and give it an arg, all it's doing is filtering for movies that have that director. So pretty simple code. Right now, we don't really know what find all does, but we know that it returns a list of movies. For those of you who don't use type hints in Python, I use them a lot. So I've typed all my code, and I think it helps explain what's going on, because you can kind of see what this is supposed to be, even if you can't see the actual implementation of this object. Or in this case, it's not even being passed anywhere. So show of hands, or shout it out, is this using dependency injection? And why or why not? Not you, Josh. You know. Don't be shy. It's okay to get it wrong. We'll only kick you out.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect an constructor you'd be passing it in, but I haven't read Python, like I said, in years and years, so
Okay.
I don't know if I'm missing something.
Okay, you'd expect a constructor. I like it. You said no as well. What makes you lean towards no?
Well, I'm not really seeing any dependencies being passed into a class.
What do you see any dependencies at all?
No.
Okay.
And so
Anyone else? Do
I'm
you
very new to Python though.
No, it's okay. It's not, most of what we're talking about today is not actually specific to Python.
Right.
Most of my examples were actually shamelessly stolen from some Ruby code. So
Okay.
it's an idea that works kind of across almost any language, unless you're doing like,
Arrow's the wrong direction.
the arrow's the wrong direction. This arrow?
Yeah. So,
Is this what you're saying?
so down below.
No.
In your name function, you're using the movie lister, you're creating it as lister. And then you're using lister and down,
Oh,
you're normally just
down here?
call main, yeah.
Okay.
You create your constructor right there, movie lister, and you have lister. And you're using lister and you're calling your function up above. Is that giving it like your constructor the dependencies to make that Spider-Man movies?
That's okay. So I think, so what you're saying is passing Spider-Man as an argument to this method
Well,
the
just
dependency?
using that whole function, is that what you're using as the dependency for the lister to create the Spider-Man movies?
Not quite. This is, yeah. So this is just kind of like the code that I would want to run if I ran this module directly. we are using like a constructor initializer here by creating this instance of this class. And then we are passing it an argument. In this case, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but just to maybe explain a little bit, I wouldn't consider arg a dependency. It's just sort of a normal parameter argument. It's not, we're using it to do something, but I wouldn't consider it a service. It's just sort of a simple value. I don't know if that answers your question exactly. Okay.
Just because the dependency hasn't been injected, so.
Yeah.
I would imagine that underscore finder is null, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if Python.
Yep, you're right. So this code actually, if I run it, won't even work, which maybe you're like, hey, dude, you're kind of cheating here.
Interesting Python meetups.
Yeah, for real. No, well,
I'm sorry.
this one I knew wouldn't work. Let me create a virtual environment really quick.
When I saw arg, it was just taking me back to C++. Like, double char, like.
What is any of this? Well, I could just rename this if that.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. I would just.
It's too late. I've renamed it, and it's French direct polar. Let me run this just to show you that I'm not lying. Let's see, movies, movie 1. Yeah, boom. You're exactly right. It's null or none because we're not actually setting it anywhere. I kind of cheated and added an any type hint to make it not the type checker happy, but if I delete that, yeah, you can see it's a little bit more apparent that this is not being set anywhere. So, not using dependency injection. Yes, that is correct. Yes to no. Weird face. As far as dependencies, I would consider finder here a dependency. We're calling some class or service and expecting it to, we're basically calling a method. We're calling a method on an instance of an object that we have access to within our class. Whereas like director, we're not calling anything on it. We're just using it to filter. So I would consider end of story, or not end of story, but to wrap up this example, I would consider finder a dependency. So let's look at another example, and let me hide my virtual environment from Git so it doesn't hate me. There we go. Okay, so we got movie 1. Now we've got movie 2. And this one's a little bit more of a concrete example because you see we have a new object or a new class that's actually doing some stuff. Going back, oh no, it wasn't in that first example. So a couple things that you might not be super familiar with if you don't use type hints a lot in Python. This protocol class is basically a way to do duck typing in Python, which is a whole nother talk that we've done before. I won't get into it too much, but for the sake of tonight, it's an interface. You got familiar with like interfaces or even like an abstract class, kind of that idea?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're basically just saying class finder is any class that implements this method. So down below we've got :delimited movie finder, which implements that method. So it is therefore implements this protocol or interface.
Is that Austin?
I don't know what that is.
Was that Austin? By the sounds of it, might not be there anymore.
Yeah.
We'll keep our ears out.
Deleted construct.
Want me to go check?
Do you want to go downstairs and check real quick?
Sure.
Just because you work here and know where things are.
Do we think it's coming from downstairs?
I don't know, but Robert and Austin were working on some stuff, and I thought Austin was still here. I hope you come back. For the people online, we heard a weird noise. Okay.
Still got one more employee that can go.
We'll start sending the guests downstairs. Soon it'll just be me talking to myself.
This might get 1 million views.
Yeah.
It's just listening to screaming people. So.
Oh, okay. That checks out.
Yeah.
All right.
Totally normal. Right there.
Good to know. So here we've got, if we just look at this bit of code, let's go through the same questions. We've got our movie lister. It's got finder, which should be a type of movie finder. What looks different? Call it out as you see it. David, I can tell you're itching. You're like, it's right there.
Give people an opportunity.
Okay, all right, I like it. I appreciate it. Is there something there that wasn't there before? Arg? Or
Just to be honest, you had in the whatever you call them, argument section, you had self and arg in the last example, but now you have the colon str.
Oh.
So
I did rename it, but that part should look, are you talking about like this whole, the parameters? That should look pretty similar.
I didn't notice the last one.
Yeah, no worries.
Follow the constructor.
Line 27.
This guy?
Injecting movie finder into that class.
Good observation. I like it. So I think what you're pointing out is that we have this initializer now. And we're creating an instance of this movie finder. Yeah. So true, that is the difference if we look at the two. And apologies, I'm not trying to make anyone feel dumb if by like asking these questions. So if it comes off that way, my apologies, not the intent. I just find that it's kind of asking questions and like working through stuff is where my learning really happens. So just trying to go that route, not like trying to be like, oh, you don't know where the thing is. Okay, so we've got an init function. And we're instantiating an instance of this class and setting it self.finder. My question for you guys would be, is this dependency injection?
No.
Okay. Talk to me. What do you think?
It's not being injected. You're initializing inside the class. Nothing's coming in from the outside.
Exactly. Yep, on the money. I'll pull up a real quick GIF or image. I guess it's not animated. So here we've got, this diagram's a little bit hard to see, but if I go over to the presentation. So we've got our movie lister. I think I renamed them a little bit, but movie lister would be like, yeah, I think that's the same name. We've got movie lister, and then we've got our movie finder interface or protocol. And then we've got our movie finder implementation. So in this case, this is our movie finder. This is our implementation of movie finder. And this is our movie lister service. So you can see by the arrows that the movie lister is still creating the movie finder implementation or the colon delimited whatever. So yeah, this would be, I think this picture is called naive, or this is not the way of doing it with dependency injection. So let's move on to a third example. It all looks pretty similar. We've got our movie finder interface. We've got our colon delimited movie finder. And pretend that arrow's not there. No spoilers. What looks different?
You're injecting the dependency.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it's really not a trick question. Yeah, that's really the only thing that's different. In our example 2, we were just creating the instance of it and just referencing that class directly. And that's where if we look at this chart, you can see the arrow going from movie lister directly to movie finder implementation. Whereas in this case, we're saying when you create an instance of our movie lister service or class, it requires a finder to work properly, essentially. And then down here, we're still calling our self.finder.findAll. And I think this is what you were pointing out earlier in this bit of code. Whereas before we were just creating our movie lister and not passing it anything, now we create our finder outside the movie lister and we pass it to the movie lister. So we have injected the dependency, or in sort of simpler terms, we just passed the dependency in the constructor. There's other ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be through the constructor. You could use like a setter function to pass a dependency. 9 times out of 10, what I've seen is using like your constructor, or in Python, your init function. So you're probably maybe wondering, like, cool, you moved like 2 lines of code and you created this thing called dependency injection. So what? And I guess that's a question for you guys. What do you think are some of the benefits of kind of going from this V2, where we instantiate our, where did I go? We instantiate our dependency directly in the class that's using it, versus instantiating it outside of the class and passing it? So just to reiterate the question, what are some benefits you might think of doing it this way?
I would think it's more streamlined for like reusability thing.
Yeah, can you expand on that, or like break that down?
It's a lot simpler this way, whereas before you're doing all these lines of code to not use the dependency injection, delimited movie finder, whatever. And right here it's just bam, bam, 2 lines of code, and you could movie lister.
Yeah, you could reuse the same finder if I had like multiple different movie listers, or maybe multiple different classes that needed a movie finder. Maybe we've got our movie lister and our movie unlister. I don't know. Maybe it takes a finder as well. What else?
Suppose you're abstracting away non-core functionality, giving yourself more flexibility. Because as long as, whatever the object is that you're passing, as long as it influences that interface, satisfying the contract that's expected,
Yeah.
you can potentially do more, have more wiggle room, so to speak.
Yeah, so a couple things I think you said or alluded to. You could maybe replace out the movie finder.
Yeah.
Since you're using an interface, you could swap it out with a different implementation.
In the future, if something changed, or also inside that, whatever's implementing that interface, you can do more for use in possibly other classes. I don't know in Python if you can implement multiple interfaces.
Have interfaces.
So I'm using the word interface in sort of a generic sense. I guess but
hand wavy.
yeah, no, that's totally fine. It's for all intents and purposes, I'm using this thing as basically an interface. It's called protocol because it's a little bit different. You'll notice that I'm nowhere am I explicitly implementing this interface, though when I pass, like this is fine. I'm saying that this class is an instance of this protocol. So that's sort of the difference with protocols. Or one of the differences, at least, you don't have to explicitly sort of say that you're implementing them. And that's kind of the idea of duck typing, which I alluded to.
If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it probably implements iDuck.
Exactly, yeah. But we don't make you say it. You can just do it. So yeah, I think you guys are on the money. Oh, I missed a couple slides. So our movie V3, here you can see we've got movie lister is now using our interface, but you'll note it does not have a line directly to movie finder implementation. Oh, I have these out of order, sorry. But still, same thing. Movie lister using the protocol / interface. There's no arrow going from movie lister to movie finder implementation. There's this assembler thing, which, I mean, in our case is not a standalone class. Our assembler is basically just the main function, is creating all of the dependencies and passing dependencies to services or classes that require those dependencies. So we don't really have like an assembler in a formalized way here. We'll come back to this in a minute. But yeah, benefits of DI. So decreased coupling, which was alluded to, basically this idea that our movie lister is no longer tightly coupled to our movie finder implementation. Something that this enables us to do is easier unit testing. Is one of the really big perks of dependency injection. You might have a, our colon delimited movie finder is pretty simple in this case, which is all it's really doing is just parsing a file that has a title, colon, director name. But that's, like if you're writing real software, you're probably not doing it that way. You might be using SQLite or any SQL database, or maybe you're reading from an API. But in your unit test, you might not have a database. You might not want to rely on a third-party API that could randomly go down and fail and cause your unit test to be flaky or intermittently fail even when nothing's wrong. So what dependency injection gets you is the ability to just swap out your real implementation for a mock or simpler implementation. It also allows you to, when you're writing unit tests, to really just test the thing that you care about. So if we look at movie lister, if we were writing a unit test for movies directed by, well, in our second example, we're also testing finder.findAll because it, we're testing finder.findAll because that's what it calls. But if we want our unit test to be fairly narrowly scoped, which is kind of a good practice of writing unit tests, is test one thing and one thing only, kind of that idea. But now we're actually sort of testing two things. We're testing that movies directed by works the way we expect it to, and by happenstance, we're also testing that findAll works the way it should. But if we don't actually, if we're just trying to test movies directed by, and we have separate unit tests for findAll, then in our test class for movie lister, we could swap out our finder with like a mock finder that just either returns a predetermined list of movies that never changes, or something to that effect. Composability has a, not is a. That's, I don't know why I wrote that. That's more of an inheritance idea, I think, but I guess I'll touch on it briefly. That's not a good example because none of these are an is a relationship. These all are has a. All of these are movie listener or lister has movie finder, not is a movie finder, which would be inheritance. That's, I don't know why I wrote that. Kind of a different idea.
But they're neighbors.
They are
Neighbor
neighbors.
neighbors.
Yeah, they're all under solid, probably. So let's go back to this. Well, we'll go forward, take a few steps back, and then take a few more steps forward again. Auto dependency injection, if you use Java or .NET, ASP.NET, this is kind of what you're used to, which is, in this case, you can see that we're sort of manually passing this finder instance to our movie lister service. But with an auto dependency injection framework, you're not necessarily doing it like this. You're just defining your class, and then through magic, it's not magic, it's just the framework, you're just getting your dependencies. You don't have to manually pass them in anywhere. They just show up because the framework creates them or grabs them for you. I'll show an example of what that actually looks like, because it's not magic, it's actually fairly straightforward. So if we go back to this example, this would be like a auto dependency injection type of thing, where you can see compared to this example where we have our assembler is sort of what creates all our dependencies and passes them to services. Here we have our service locator, which is basically the idea of you have this central thing that you register your services to, and then that is the thing that finds the concrete implementations of your interfaces. Did that make sense at all? I'll show an example, but I used a few new words that I hadn't defined before, so are there any questions on that? Okay. I'll show, if there's confusion, hopefully this example will clear it up. Where's my example? My example is another VS Code instance. So this is what takes us to this Django DI package, which is probably going to give David a heart attack.
Never heard of it.
That's because I made it. No one uses it. Django DI. Where's, what am I? What am I looking for? Django DI, there we go. Please don't steal my PyPI tokens. Come on, MacBook, work. There we go. I'm just gonna do something real quick so I don't accidentally click on it. There we go. Okay. So what this class is, as my README very poorly describes, or what this package does, is Django dependency injection, inspired by ASP.NET, which, like I said, if you do anything with ASP.NET, or which is a C# framework, it automatically gives you your dependencies. So let's pop open an example of what that looks like, which I don't know if, oh shoot. I had a demo folder, but I guess I didn't push it. Hey, Josh. There should be a VS Code instance somewhere. Actually, I'll just do it real quick. I have no idea where it's at on my computer. I've got several virtual desktops going on, so I don't know where it's at. Django DI.
Is that your personal laptop that you have right now?
Yeah, that's my MacBook. This is my work laptop, which is like the power horse that's streaming everything. When this loads, can you just git push?
Give me just a second. How do you type on this keyboard, Joe?
One letter at a time. Did that work?
It is still pushing. Yep.
Hey, there we go. Cool. Thank you. So we've got this nifty demo folder. If you haven't used Django, which is probably a lot of us, it's fine. What I'm going to show you isn't really Django specific. It's both Django specific, but the concepts are the same thing we've been discussing. It's not going to be some of it like this. Just you can kind of ignore. This is Django stuff. If you haven't used it, Django is like probably the most popular web framework in Python land. So here we have. This should look somewhat familiar. Essentially an interface for this service called reverser. And we can see that it takes in a single value that's a string and it spits out another string. You might be able to guess what it does to that string based on the name, but here we have a concrete implementation of the reverser. And I guess what I mean by concrete is this doesn't have an actual implementation. You can see it just has these 3 dots, which is actually like valid Python code. That's how you define a protocol method. Or I think you can write the word pass. Whereas this has an actual implementation. And this is just, all this is doing is just reversing the string. Thing called DI, which is a DI context, and I'll pop it open in a second. And we're calling this method, which is register singleton. And then we give it the interface, in this case reverser, and the concrete implementation, or in this case an instance of it, which is simple reverser. And then here we have our view, which again is not, if you've done any like Fast API or Flask, any sort of Python web framework, it's pretty similar. The code's slightly different, but this is just like an endpoint that if you, in this case, go to our root URL, it's going to load this code with your HTTP request, do some logic, and then return a response. So in this case, we're just grabbing the query parameter name from our request, and then we're using our reverser instance, or our dependency, and then reversing the name and returning it back to and as part of our HTTP response. So I mentioned it, I said I was going to talk about auto dependency injection. You'll notice if we look at the rest of our code, nowhere are we calling index and passing it an instance of reverser. What we do is we simply register it once. Where did my slides go? There we go. So we register it once with our, so in our case, again, we don't really have an assembler. This is just sort of all of the top level code is going to execute. This is like a single file example of using Django. Usually Django is like a dozen plus files for even a hello world example, but I just wanted to put everything in one file to make it easier to look at. So our assembler is just sort of the whole file, and we've got this service locator thing, which is this DI object that we're registering our interface. And not only do we register our interface, but we register the concrete implementation of that interface. And then here, with the power of type hints, we just specify what the type of this object should be using its interface. And then when this code executes, we're using this decorator, which I can explain kind of what that is in a sec, to go and grab the instance of our concrete instance, in this case, simple reverser, from our DI service locator, or sometimes called a container, and pass it. So sort of the magic, if you will, is this decorator. If you haven't used decorators, all they really are is just a function that wraps another function. So in this case, I'll go ahead and just open it. We define a function that wraps another function, and then we return our new function. So that allows you to write reusable code that executes before and or after the function that it's wrapping executes. So you can see here, inject dependencies by checking global context using the type annotations. So we use this module built into Python called inspect to look at the actual annotations. So that would be this reverser type hint right there. And then we basically just have this very simple for loop that's just looking through the list of services that we have registered in our context object. I can pop that open in a sec. And if we find it, we return it. And if we don't, we ignore it. So I could still have, some other dependency that Django supplies for me, but I can kind of mix a little bit. And then what the context object looks like. So this DI thing is just a single instance of this DI context. And all this really is just a loose wrapper around a dictionary that lets you register a type of an object with a specific class, or a function for the type. So a singleton would be like only ever use the single instance of this class. Transient, and these are like .NET terms, is every time the dependency needs to be used, create a new instance of it. And there's kind of different use cases for those. So I feel like I just threw a lot at you guys in terms of this auto dependency injection framework. This is sort of my own creation, so this isn't something that any of you will probably ever use, but the ideas are fundamentally extremely similar to, again, things like ASP.NET or certain Java frameworks. I don't use Java, so I don't know offhand, but I don't know, Spring Boot or something. I don't know. Maybe you know, Josh. Yeah. Yeah. You can still do the same thing where you replace the dependencies in your tests. You would just have to tweak that code a little bit. I guess I could show you some tests real quick, what that looks like. Here I just have some very simple unit tests that are testing that when I register a service to the container or the context, that I can get it back out using a few different ways of doing that. I also have this test view class, which is basically testing that this wrapper actually works, or this decorator works. So I don't know what time we're at. 6:47. Okay, yeah, that's close to an hour. Let me run through a couple more slides, and then that's about all I got. Oh, I meant to replace that. Zupa cool summary goes here. Yeah, so in summary, that's all right. Yeah, inversion of control is an idea that is helpful to be familiar with. Dependency injection is a pattern that you're likely to see actually a lot more often. Sort of if you picture a Venn diagram, dependency injection lives inside of the IoC circle. All this comes with a big asterisk. I don't see a lot of dependency injection used in Python. There are other ways to replace your, if you're writing unit tests in Python and you want to like replace something for your tests, you can use something called monkey patching, which is a very dynamic language specific thing. In a language like C#, you're going to have a lot harder time doing something like that, in my experience. Yeah.
What is monkey patching exactly?
Do you want to explain monkey patching?
Do you understand mocking?
Yeah.
Like you can overwrite and expect a response from a callable thing.
Oh, okay. So, okay. So it's exactly like mocking, pretty much. It's just mocking.
This is I'd say the difference is mocking, you're typically, like you're kind of, so the different, monkey patching is like something you're doing at runtime. Like at runtime, you're replacing what a certain chunk of code is doing, whereas mocking, I don't know if I'm explaining this well.
I think I might just
like mocking, mocking like your code would still all have to like compile.
Yeah.
I'm not explaining this well. It's basically just like dynamically swapping stuff out at runtime.
Yeah.
So for example, I guess an example would be, it doesn't actually have to be unit testing. Say you're using a third-party library that does some functionality and you find a bug in it, but they refuse to fix the bug.
Oh.
You can just monkey patch that library to fix the bug yourself.
Yeah.
It's sort of, in my opinion, a little bit of an escape hatch that is not always the, like if you're monkey patching, you should kind of have a good reason why.
Yeah, so like mocking would be kind of like actually creating that mock, right? It's a mock and we know it is, but like monkey patching is actually like breaking into it and saying like, no, you're not a whatever you are anymore because I'm going to actually have you return this value no matter what.
Yeah, I'd say it's a fairly brute force way of doing things. You can still like use mocks in Python without monkey patching, but monkey patching is like sort of a step further, which you can't really do in other languages like C# without probably doing some really weird introspection, reflection stuff. But in Python, it's a lot easier because you can really set anything to anything else. Doesn't really matter until runtime when it blows up. But anyways, any questions? No one.
You mentioned you don't see it being used a lot now that Python's becoming more feature-rich with like other types of language that typing's standard now, like in your examples. Do you see more uses for Dion?
I would love to see. This is some. Short answer, yes. Though I don't know that there's more or less uses than there used to be, but I think that the level, like the Python language has evolved to a point where it's going to be a lot more feasible and useful to go the dependency injection route. Like, because as you saw it, there's probably other ways to do it, but it typically you're using like some sort of interface and some sort of concrete class if you're doing like auto dependency injection, which is kind of like really the way you probably want to be doing it, unless it's a very small project. Then you can just sort of manually pass the dependencies around. I think Go kind of works like that. Go doesn't seem to have like an auto dependency injector. My point being, I think that the typing in Python has caught up to where would be a lot more feasible to do something like that. something when I moved from like working on C# stuff to a Django project, I was kind of confused about was I didn't see a lot of service layers, and that might have just been the code I was looking at, but it was also something that the Django docs didn't really talk about. Whereas in like an ASP.NET project, you would have a controller, a service layer, and then the service layer would typically talk to your model layer. Whereas in Django, at least when I first started working with it, it seemed like most people either just shoved all of their logic in their view layer or their model layer. But having, I think, that service layer helps you write more maintainable code long term and test it a little bit easier. And there's, I mean, people have written like huge Django apps without having a service layer, so obviously it's possible, but I kind of just prefer that paradigm more, I guess.
You can build out your Django DI a lot more.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just kind of started as like, I bet it's not that hard to do. And then I wrote it, and it really wasn't that, like, it wasn't too difficult. Because it's, I mean, at the end, it's really, again, it's a pretty simple idea. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Was this, hopefully, people learned something from my monologuing for an hour. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. 6:54, about an hour. Like I said, feel free to hang out. Yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks, it was great. Yeah, in your, on the charts, we had assembler. Was I the only one that was going back to writing x86 assembly language? That might just be a me thing, I don't know.
I don't think I ever did x86 stuff. I did Verilog at one point.
It sounds very low level.
Yeah, it was. It hurt my brain. That was in school. I have not touched it since.
It was kind of cool to like go go from Python like all the way down to that. Just kind of see how they used to have it back in the day.
Yeah.
Fun fact: has anybody played Roller Coaster Park Tycoon?
Oh, I just read an article about this the other day. It was like,
Yeah. Which makes sense because the ran so good back in the day. And what's he doing this? Because everything else looks like terrible and it's running really slow. So props to Chris Sawyer.
was it a single guy?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, one guy really
did all this
I don't know if the
down.
others are hard or anything.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Real quick, couple references. There's a ton of reading on dependency injection, but if you kind of want to go to the source, Martin Fowler is a good place to look at. He's him and Rob Martin or Uncle Bob are sort of two of the OGs that I cite a lot for this kind of stuff. So source code I will make public and post on the meetup and shoot it out in Discord. There is going to be a recording. You can go back and watch, and I'll make the slides available too. For all of that stuff, Spokane, python.com is typically the easiest way to find it. So like right now, we've got this, but once, like tomorrow when I have time, I'll go in and add the recording, and I don't know if I have the slides for this one, but this one has slides, so hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to do that. Also, we have a Discord server. Check it out. We're also evolving, and we have the Go meetup, part of our Discord server now. The organizer for that joined, so
Is Go occurring in Teletech now too? Like
Go is not an IntelliTech thing. There's a guy named Seth, super cool. He started the Go user group up over the summer, I think. I've gone to a few of them.
I was there for speaking.
Yeah.
But like,
Not an IntelliTech thing, but trying to create like a central spot for all of the user groups to kind of, there's sort of like a bunch of different random tech stuff in Spokane, but it's not really like easy to find it all unless you go like digging. Probably Meetup is just the easiest way to see some of the stuff going on, but there's some people that aren't using Meetup for their tech stuff. So would like to have like a central spot where you can just find everything going on tech-wise. So Seth and I are kind of working on that.
cool.
Yeah.
So you're gonna ask what kind of adventures in AI have you got?
Let's see. Adventures in AI. Buzzword, artificial intelligence. This one was pretty, I don't even remember. I think Clayton spoke for half of it, and then I tried to demonstrate a AI that could play tic-tac-toe. This was before like AI as we know it, like ChatGPT. This was like 2 years ago or something, so it was like AI that can learn and play a game. If you are interested, I should like add a best previous talks, because this intro to machine learning one is really good. This was all Clayton speaking, and he knocked it out of the park. If you have any interest in getting into machine learning stuff, he presented awesome and kind of went from the ground up. So
That would be awesome. I've been real into YouTube videos of people getting like machine learning to beat the first level of Mario or stuff like that.
yeah, I forget. I think he kind of talks about like what machine learning is, different types of models, and then sort of how to do some actual specific stuff in Python. This one was like 2 years ago though, so it's not super fresh in my brain. Yeah, SpokanePython.com, it's all there. I try and keep it pretty up to date. Yeah. Okay, that concludes our planned portion of the evening, except, are you gonna, you're all ready? Do you want it to be on the stream or just the people in the room?
Just people.
Okay, yeah, you can go ahead and kill it if you want, Josh. Thank you to everyone online.
So they should come in, and that's the bonus.
Yeah.